Inspiring Change is the beginning of a collection of interviews and stories of creative people. I've always been fascinated by what makes people follow through with their creative ideas, hang on to those sparks of ideas, and follow through all the way to the final stages. The inspiration to start this collection of interviews and stories came from Chris Walton, who sadly no longer is with us. He was passionate and inspirational in the way he followed through with his creation of the eco-village, all the way through into every minute detail. The message he gave to me was like, whatever you want to do, give it a really good go. So I'm following his advice. The purpose of the collection of these stories and interviews is to inspire other people to follow their own creativity and maybe see a little bit of themselves mirrored in one or the other interview or story and go like, oh, I could do something like this. This is a little bit like me. Inspiring change.
I get inspiration from many different places. Movies, books, newspapers. I write mainly about human frailty, which is not to be confused with human faults, but the idea of human frailty interests me a lot. And what I think about is the person first. I create the character, and the plot evolves out from the character, which is sometimes the other way around. I think you're supposed to write the plot first, but I always have the character first. For instance, with my latest book that I'm writing now, Street Life, there's a homeless man in it. Now, for the last couple of years where I live, there's been a homeless man that wanders around. He does a circuit around my neighbourhood. I call him the TikTok man because he's always there during a certain time. And I wave and he waves. We've never spoken two words together. And from him I got the idea for Hector in this story that I'm writing at the moment.
Features in your book now.
Yeah, he's become a complete character. He's got more education. He's not like him physically or mentally or anything. It's just the idea for the character came from that. It is like a visual in my head. And generally what I do is stop everything, grab a pen and paper and sit down and just troubleshoot. I just scroll anything, anything and everything. I put the character in the middle and I just go outward from there. Yeah, lots of different things can come to me. A little bit like the gentleman that walks the street. I'm a little bit of a bowerbird. I pick up things from where I find them. The character I'm writing at the moment, Hector, I've just done a complete background to him. I wrote his past. None of it will appear in the book, but for me, I will know it, so it will make him a complete character. I just scroll down as much as I can, as fast as I can, while it's in my mind.
So it's kind of like downloading it from your brain.
It is, and the more you write, you find the more you get. Yeah. Obsession. Obsession. You get obsessed with the characters and their stories. In White Country, I wasn't so worried about getting published as I was doing the characters justice in the story. I told some people it was like having another family in my head. Yep. And even the villains, they were fun. But the kids in particular, I was wrapped up in the idea that, all right, the story has to do them justice, because I didn't want anybody looking back and thinking I'd written half-hearted characters or plot twists that were idiotic or anything like that. I wanted a story that satisfied me first, me and the characters, and then afterwards, if anybody liked it, well then that was just a bonus.
That's great. So it sounds like it's very much like an inside-out process.
It is. It's obsession. To sit down for 2 years, to write a book for 2 years, you have to be obsessed with the story. It's the way I'm made.
This is you're made
From
definitely works for you to hang on to something.
yeah, when I was a kid, when I was young, I used to write down stories, probably not very good stories, but write down stories on paper and staple the side and then give them to everybody as presents,
As in that was your book?
Yeah, they're my books, probably about a 10-page little thing with coloured in bits, and they were my books. The idea that somebody could read something I written and be as compelled by it and as pleased by it as I am when I read a good book, that's something I always wanted. As you yourself know, I went through periods of bad depression. I'm manic depressive. I had troubles with addiction early on, and I've been sober for 15 years now, but the depression, that lingered for quite a while, and I found that when I was in that state, the sort of things I was writing were very idiosyncratic, they were all to do with me. It was all my interior dialogue on paper.
Yes.
And some of it was a little bit, it just wasn't good. And it wasn't anything I felt compelled to finish once I started it. So consequently, I started a number of books but never finished them. When I started writing White Country, I got the idea first of a story that has complete departure from anything else I'd ever written, and it had nothing to do with me. It was a pure story on its own merits. It was made up, it was fiction, and I think that's what I wanted. I wanted to get back to writing the sort of thing I wrote when I was a little kid, a made-up story. I've kept journals all my life, and I think the stuff that I wrote in journals was probably good for me to write.
Yeah.
I went back and looked at a few pieces, and I thought, now, if I died tomorrow and someone came and cleaned out my house, do I really want this sitting here as a reflection of myself as a writer? And I thought,
want that?
no, I didn't, so I destroyed it.
Wow.
It's one thing I've always been certain of.
Yes.
I've not been certain that I'm any good, I've just been certain that I'm a writer. Sobriety.
Sobriety herself.
Sobriety. Age. I needed to be I think I needed to get to this point in my life, I needed to be a bit older. I'll be 45 in a couple of weeks. I needed that so I could look back on some things with perspective. And look back on the times in my life where I wasn't happy, when I wasn't being good to myself, and see the difference between now and then, and feel the sense of my own power now. Because, I can do it, because I'm old enough to see the flaws and for what they were, and to know that, this was what I was supposed to do all along. A lot of my trouble early on was trying to fit my idea of who I was with what other people wanted.
Okay.
And being a people pleaser, I often tried to mould myself into what people wanted.
Yeah.
Now I just live the way I want. It could be called selfishness, but I don't think so. I think it's called power.
I think so too.
I've had people that have been very, big in my life, played important roles in my life that, my family, Eltian Childs, the rock star.
Yes.
I started writing, in fact, I got the idea for the book and started writing White Country about the same time he was in X Factor.
Okay.
He was a 36-year-old worker who drove a bobcat during the day, and he wanted one more chance at being a rock star. At that time in my life, I had all but given up the idea of becoming a published author. But then I got the idea for White Country, and I thought to myself, I'll have one more go at being a writer. And our journeys sort of paralleled until he became a rock star and I became a writer. that drive to do something with yourself and being, perhaps slapped around by life a little bit and thinking, do I still have that in me? Is it still possible? It encouraged me a lot. I keep a picture of him on my desk. The addiction and the depression.
Okay.
I was an alcoholic and a drug addict for a lot of years, all my 20s. And with that, when I got sober was when I was diagnosed manic depressive. They said what I'd done is spent most of my life trying to either come up or down, self-medicating.
Right.
And it was difficult to get that under control. Even today I suffer with bouts of depression. Not so much the mania anymore because I've got tablets that dull the mania, but I suffer bouts of depression. And now when I come to that point now, I say to myself, okay, yes, it's a bleak day, yes, you're having a hard time, but you know that you're going to get out of it. You know you're going to come through to the other side, and it's just a question of waiting it out. I used to think that, the rest of my life was going to be as bad as this, and that's catastrophic thinking. It's not true.
Yeah.
You are going to get out of it, the sun is going to shine, and that's it. For a lot of years, my mother and I pitched a battle between ourselves, and my father was a journalist and an author, and he was also a mad alcoholic.
Okay.
And my mother lived through that, and so when I said I wanted to become a writer, I think she saw echoes of that. She was not encouraging. Whenever I show her something of my writing, she'd say, "You're very good, but it's too dark, and I don't read dark stuff." And it was a bit of a slap in the face because you want your mother to encourage you and to say, good work, Dale. When I got the idea for White Country, I told her about it, and she said, "It sounds like a nice story." And she said, "It sounds completely different to anything you've written before." And I said, "Well, it is actually. It's a little bit more hopeful, I think." And I gave her the first draft to read. I went down one day and gave it to her, and I went back home while she read it. And the whole time at home I kept thinking, "Are you an idiot? What on earth what possessed you to give her the draft to read, But I rang her up. My stomach was in knots, and I rang her up to say, "Don't read it." And she sounded really funny on the phone. She said, "I've been crying." I said, "So you're crying because I killed a character?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "Fantastic. That's, as a reader it's awful, but as a writer that's gold. If you can get someone to emote that deeply because of one of your characters." She was captured by the story. She loved it. She championed it from then on. It was a turning point. And I joke now that she's now my editor and my manager because she runs around telling everybody that my daughter's an author. It's changed my life in that how I feel about myself is completely different now. I like to think I've still got, my head's not too big. I don't think that I'm grown too big for my boots or anything, but how I feel about myself has changed. I used to have a very negative self-image. It wasn't even the publication. It was finishing the story. When I did that, I knew I was a writer. I worried about what I would go on with.
Yes.
And towards the end of writing White Country, I got another idea, and this is about the story about the homeless man. And by the time I'd finished White Country, I had a full plot in my head for this other novel. So I'm writing that now.
So creativity sounds like it sort of feeds on itself.
That's exactly what it does, yeah. The more you get, the more you find is there. I plan on being 75, 80 years old and look back and see a number of books on my shelf with my name on them. And hopefully, it's not Wuthering Heights, but hopefully it's good work. Your mind is incredible, and it's incredible what it can do. You know, they say, you know, you only use 10% of your mind. Well, there's 90% of it there left to mine and get gold from. You can have an addiction, you can be mentally ill, you can have a number of challenges, but there's still so much in your mind left to grasp, and there's endless inspiration.